Hey, these aren't my books, they're my mum's. Jesus, that's so depressing. How does she read these? Welcome to another video on the wonderful world of politics. I know. Ooh, I don't want to hear about politics from a biased dude in his mum's study. Well, too bad. This will be on the final test. And I don't care if you don't take tests anymore, because I have more power than you know and you will be tested. Today, we're going to do an easy to quantify and define topic known as centrism. Okay, maybe not too easy, but it can be defined. See, look, it even has a definition. Person who holds moderate political views. Alright, fair. What are moderate political views? Well, Google's telling me that a moderate is just someone with moderate political views, so they're clearly not helping me there. Alright, fine. Let's pin this word down. Alright, so I'm sure you, like me, were not satisfied with Google's honestly pathetic definition. This requires more robust investigation, which involves looking about 200 pixels to the right. Centrism is a political outlook or position that involves acceptance and or support of a balance of social equity and a degree of social hierarchy, while opposing political changes which would result in a significant shift for society strongly to either the left or the right. Hey, that's a bit more robust. At least it isn't an entirely cyclical definition like before. Thanks, Wikipedia. But let's pick that apart a little. Centrism is about as much of a position as an iceberg is a good place to build a house on. For those watching in the future, icebergs were large collections of ice in the ocean that would melt every year and ideally refreeze. Centrism is not a steadfast ideology. Now, obviously words can change with time, but very few political beliefs are built directly opposing or supporting another one. Communism is not anti-capitalist, libertarianism is not the B-side of socialism, and fascism is not the negative of democracy. Now, this isn't to say that none of these political ideologies aren't directly opposed to each other. Now, I wouldn't immediately call you an idiot if you try to tell me that some of these beliefs are steadfastly opposed. But I would if you told me that they were born deliberately to be just that. Centrism, however, was born in direct opposition to change. Going back to that definition, opposing political changes which will result in a significant shift in society. Centrists just don't want things to change. Their political views aren't based on anything concrete. No moral values, no indisputable facts, and no statistical truths. It's a purely reactionary ideology by definition, meaning that the values that it espouses change based on what it's reacting to. So now, to chase after this pesky definition that we're looking for, we need to look at what centrism is reacting to. Now, I'm sure you've seen this thing before. Yep, it's a line. To keep this simple, we're going to call everything to the left here, the left, and everything to the right here, the right. And right here in the middle, we'll call this the center. I guess they weren't feeling too creative when they named these ones. So over here on the left, we have people campaigning for progress, social equality, opposition to hierarchies, progress and the like. The further you get, the more aggressively you might want people to have their rights. Might have like socialism here and then further across like communism or something. If you're watching this, there's a pretty good chance that you're kind of already over here, and that's fine. Over here on the right, we've got progress, but evil. Okay, yeah, I'm incredibly biased, but just stay with me. The goal of the right is to either oppose change or revert it. A typical one of these lines will probably throw fascism on the end here or something like that, implying that it's like the opposite of communism. I'll put like a arrow or something on each end, but no one is really thinking past the big F or the big C. Also, liberals, you're like right here on this thing. Fuck you. You're even worse than centrists. You're political pawns. Get the fuck. So, the enlightened centrists oppose change. Wait, the goal of the right is to either oppose change or revert it. Never mind. As the tug of war of the line moves either to the left or the right, the goal of the centrists is to oppose this change, to make sure it doesn't get too radical or scary. But, well, I'm gonna have to shatter the illusion that we've got going on here. This, other than trying to represent political issues and something as simple as a 2D line, is wrong. This is not the middle where we are now. For the US at least, it's like this. Now, when the rope has been pulled so far to the right, the center kind of comes along with it. The Overton window looks like this. The Overton window is the small area in the middle, which contains policies that the general public are okay with discussing. The centrist policies, which are just plucked from the two mainstream parties, are actually just coming from two right-wing parties. The change that is so desperately needed, social reforms like defunding the police or higher taxes, are resisted by centrism. Planted directly in between the Democrats and the Republicans, centrists are just conservatives with a tendency to silence genuine political discussion. To see how this happens, we're going to have to look at America's two-party system and how the center-right policies of one allows the far-right policies of the other to thrive. So I want you to imagine a line, but instead it's like a big ratchet. I'm just fucking with you. The Republicans are a far-right party, and the Democrats are a center-right party with just a few sprinkles of progressiveness in it. It's just liberalism. One makes things worse, and the other makes things... This old fart loves to reach across the aisle, saying this constantly in his campaign. He's only able to give what is barely more than a centrist take when the people he's up against are like some of the most insane people ever. And then at the same time, he talks about working with the mainstream Republicans. You know what the mainstream Republicans are? This guy was the mainstream Republican like 2 years ago. This, as Biden says, is the hallmark of American democracy. If we don't work together, we are doomed to a fake democracy. This is kind of the whole strategy of the Democratic Party. They need to paint the Republicans as evil, while showing themselves as the sensible center party. They just need to look not evil. They don't need to be good. They just have to be the better option out of the two. They don't care about anybody on the left because they know that they would never vote for the Republicans, and because it's a first past the post system, they wouldn't dare to waste their vote on a third party. Instead, they campaign them as milquetoast, pathetically moderate politicians like Joe Biden to appeal to the centrist bloc, while also appearing as liberal to appeal to those cosplaying as leftists. When Joe Biden recently did a slightly more than centrist take of calling out the Republican Party, well, a little bit, the centrists started crawling out of the woodwork, saying the most stupid takes like, oh, what's with the scary lights in the Marines? No one cares about that shit. That's the most reactionary take you could possibly have. It's gotten to the point where people don't even care about the words people are saying, let alone the nuances of them. They just care about the scary lights and the dude standing behind them. If you look at these takes and agree with them past maybe, okay, it was a little weird that he put red lights behind him, then I don't know what to say. Your brain is broken. Think about it a little bit more critically and don't fall for the rhetoric that the two parties throw at you. Now, you might be hearing these things and thinking, wow, these two parties are terrible. They must be equally as bad or something. And I am stupid, I'm going to go eat my own. No, stop it. You're turning into a centrist. Look at this meme. Isn't it insufferable? You don't want to turn into that. Centrists love this kind of thinking. Painting both sides as equally evil is probably one of their favorite things to do. It's an easy stance to take. It's almost understandable when you look at the two choices that Americans have to choose from. However, labeling these two sides as equally as bad is incredibly reductionary and arguably negligible. Let's look at these two sides for a second. We have one saying, let's reduce the already lacking rights for these minorities in order to consolidate power further into those that don't fit into these groups. And we have the other one saying, let's not do that. Let's keep them as they are. Alright, so these sides clearly don't seem to compare very well, which makes sense when we go back to the line, which we will not because it is stupid, and instead look at this a bit more broadly. Try this one. Civil rights or a white ethno-state? I'll give you a minute to choose a side. I know, it can be hard. To ask these two sides to compromise is impossible. They are diametrically opposed. One wants to live and the other one wants, well, the opposite of that. Placing them against each other implies that not only are they just as extreme as each other, but also that they are both just as credible and just as factual. I'm not trying to say this is a regular debate that two people may have on a regular basis, but in a less immediately horrifying situation, the news constantly betrays things such as climate science, transphobia, and many other things as on equal footing. While one side clearly has genuine factual backing, and the other is wild reactionary bullshit. The constant calls to reach across the aisle, to compromise, only bring genuine left-leaning discussion down to a pathetic whimper, and allows far-right ideologies to slip through the cracks. Imagine the classic centrist talking point. Oh, I just pick and choose which policies I want from each party. I think for myself. God, aren't you glad you're not one of them? When the policies that you decide on come from two right-leaning parties, you're always going to choose right-leaning policies. I'll try to say it even more simply. When what you support is the status quo and the status quo is conservative, you are conservative. When what you believe in tends to be the reinforcement of cishet white men stood at the top while throwing pennies down to the poors, You are conservative. You are not seeing past a so-called squabble between the left and the right. You are a lapdog of the far right, a helpful voting bloc to gum up the works and distract the left with your shitty memes. If you are a centrist or a liberal and have sat through this video to get all the way to here, then that is genuinely implorable. It's not very easy to listen to someone disagreeing with you when you can't butt in. But if you did get this far, then I assume that you're already pretty good at listening to opposing sides. I guess that is kind of the whole point of being a centrist. I want you to instead think a bit more about the two sides that you try to connect all the time. You may think of yourself as a centrist, but if you support things like strong ecological policies, high taxes on the rich, or social equality for all races, sexual and gender identities, then you're just a leftist. The thing is, most left and right policies aren't just arbitrary. If you believe in the hierarchy established by wealth accumulation, then you probably want other oppressive hierarchies to stay, and are likely to vote for other socially regressive issues. It wouldn't make sense to want two things that are so diametrically opposed. I mean, it's possible, but the cognitive dissonance would be a lot to deal with. You're not automatically a bad person if you're a centrist. You very well may be, but you're not nearly as bad as someone on the far right. And if you are on the far right, then fuck off. No one wants you. Think a little more. I appreciate you watching this video, and I especially appreciate you getting this far. It would mean a lot to me if you could tell me what I screwed up, if there's maybe like a statistic that I said wrong, or you just think that I'm stupid. Any engagement is appreciated, really. I appreciate it if you could subscribe and like. If you didn't like the video, then you're more than welcome to give it a thumbs down as well. Anyways, see you in the next one.